The desert winds of Quora, 9 carried dust like knives. Each grain shimmered beneath the twin suns, glittering as though the world were trying to blind anyone foolish enough to look up. For the Thaurians, a reptilian species evolved from burrow dwellers, the dunes meant one thing: thirst. Their lives had always been a long negotiation with scarcity, and in the year 6732 of their recorded calendar, the negotiation was failing. Wells were drying, aquifers collapsing, sky harvesters sputtering with nothing left to condense. The elders whispered of extinction in voices as dry as the ground beneath their feet. But that day, something unusual broke the monotony of sand and heat. A glint on the horizon. A strange object, smoking, jagged, half-buried like a claw tearing at the desert floor. The scavenger patrol of Clan Yurik, 3 lean Thaurians mounted on sand skimmers, slowed their approach. None spoke until they had circled the wreckage, spears ready. "It is not Thaurian make," rasped Hesk, the eldest of the patrol, his tongue flicking over cracked scales. "No mark of clan. No stamp of guild." "Then it is foreign," said Kiri, the youngest. She squinted, her protective eye membranes drawn tight. "Perhaps a sky-fallen weapon. Or a cursed relic." The third, a hulking brute named Drask, tilted his head, his ridged crest bristling. "Or perhaps food." They laughed, harsh, croaking laughter that cracked like dry wood. But their laughter died when the wreckage shifted, and from it crawled a figure unlike any they had ever seen. Not scaled, not shelled, not feathered, soft, pink, bleeding from the brow and gasping like an overheated hatchling. The creature collapsed in the sand, one arm outstretched. Its lips moved, a dry whisper they could barely hear. "Water." The Thaurians exchanged looks. They understood the word, the trade tongue was universal enough. But the sight of the being was baffling. So frail, so exposed to the burning suns. It seemed impossible that such a creature could have survived even a moment on Quora 9. Kiri nudged it with the butt of her spear. "Pathetic. Its skin is like unbaked clay. It will die in minutes." "Let it," said Drask. "Less burden to carry home." Yet something strange stirred in Hesk's chest. A half-forgotten teaching of the old code, recited before the Waterstones in his youth. "Offer a drink to the thirsty, for the desert spares none." The words prickled like sand under his scales. Against all practicality, he unhooked his flask. Only a sip remained, barely enough for himself, but he tilted it toward the creature's lips anyway. The being's mouth closed around the spout, and it drank greedily. Too greedily. Hesk almost pulled away in irritation, but then the creature coughed, sputtered, and looked at him with wide, startling eyes. Not reptilian slits. Round. Clear. Wet with life. "Thank you," it whispered, voice ragged. "Name's Carter. Lieutenant James Carter. Earth Navy." None of those words meant anything to the Thaurians. But one thing was obvious. They had given water to something desperate, and in doing so had entangled themselves in a fate they could not yet imagine. Carter awoke hours later in the clan's camp, sheltered beneath stretched hides that blocked the worst of the suns. His skin had been smeared with cooling paste, and a jug of water sat at his side. The Thaurians watched him with the same wariness they would give a venomous desert crawler. He sat up slowly, every muscle aching. His last memory was of the ship tearing apart in orbit, alarm screaming, his pod slamming into atmosphere with no control. He had expected to die. Yet here he was, alive, staring at 3 lizard folk who looked like they were deciding whether to cook him or keep him. Kiri broke the silence. "Human. What is human?" "That'd be me," Carter said with a weak grin. "And if you keep me alive, maybe I'll make it worth your while." Drask bared his fangs. "You are weak. Worthless. You drain our water." "Yeah, well," Carter muttered. "You're ugly and smell like a fish market in a heat wave, but I didn't say anything." Kiri hissed at the insult, but Hesk raised a claw to silence her. The elder's eyes, milky with age, stayed locked on Carter. "The code compelled me to give you water. But now you owe a debt." Carter coughed a laugh. "Buddy, you don't know the half of it. You just saved my life. Where I come from, that's not a debt, it's a bond. And humans, we take bonds seriously." The Thaurians didn't understand his words, not fully, but they understood his tone. Still, they saw him as fragile, pitiable. A creature that could not endure the desert would not endure their world's trials. Their drought was centuries old. No soft-skinned alien could change that. But Carter was already thinking differently. He always had. Naval training had drilled survival into his bones, and Earth had raised him with stubbornness in his blood. The way these people rationed drops of water, the way they bowed to inevitability, it screamed to him of resignation. And resignation, Carter thought, was the one enemy humans never bowed to. That night, the clan gathered around their dwindling firestones. Hesk introduced the human to the chieftain, Yirik herself, a broad-shouldered matriarch whose scales bore the burned scars of 100 drought years. She listened as Hesk explained how he had found the creature dying in the sands, and how the code had demanded mercy. Yirik studied Carter with an expression between curiosity and contempt. "You are strange, human, thin, soft. You would not last a day without us." "Yeah, I've been told worse," Carter said, forcing a grin. "But I've got a question. You people look like you've been thirsty for a long time. Don't you have wells? Rivers?" The Thaurians shifted uncomfortably. To speak of their thirst was taboo. Yet Yirik finally growled, "Our rivers are dust. Our wells are stone. The sky gives nothing. We take what we can from the dew nets, but even they yield little. The desert wins, always." Carter frowned. "That's not how humans roll. On Earth, we've got deserts too. Big ones. We found ways to make them bloom." "Bloom?" Kiri repeated, confused. "Sand cannot bloom." "You'd be surprised," Carter said softly. The Thaurians laughed at him, the sound harsh and bitter. But Yirik didn't laugh. She leaned forward, eyes sharp. "You claim much, Softskin. But you have nothing. No water. No tools. Nothing but your tongue." "Yeah," Carter admitted. "But give me time, and I'll show you what humans can do." Over the next days, Carter learned more about their plight. The Thaurians lived by raiding and rationing, their society slowly crumbling as water grew scarcer. Entire clans had vanished. Their engineers tried and failed to revive the ancient machines that once pulled moisture from the skies. To Carter, their technology looked crude, clever in its way, but starved of innovation. And yet, even in their desperation, they had spared water for him. That fact stuck in his mind like a thorn. He couldn't walk away from it. He started asking questions. Too many questions, in Kiri's opinion. Why do you bury your water jars in sand instead of stone cellars? Why don't you recycle waste water? Why not boil down brine? His curiosity irritated them, but it also intrigued them. He scribbled diagrams in the dirt with sticks, explaining condensation, distillation, siphons. The concepts were alien, yet the spark in his eyes was undeniable. One afternoon, under the blistering suns, Carter rigged together a crude still from scrap metal, tubing, and hide. He filled it with brine from a poisoned well. Hours later, as the first clear drops of fresh water dripped into a jar, the Thaurians gasped. It was only a mouthful, but to them it was sorcery. Kiri stared in awe. You pulled water from poison." Carter grinned. "Not magic. Just science. And this is only the beginning." Hesk's throat clicked as he swallowed. For the first time in many cycles, he felt something other than despair. He felt possibility. But not everyone was convinced. Around the firestones that evening, Drask snarled, "Tricks! Useless tricks! A single mouthful does not save a clan. This creature is a drain, nothing more." Yirik silenced him with a glare, but doubt lingered in the clan. Could one fragile outsider truly offer them salvation? Or was it just a cruel mirage in the desert? Carter, listening to their arguments, clenched his fists. He wasn't here to be worshipped or dismissed. He was here because they had given him water when they didn't have enough for themselves. That meant he owed them something greater than gratitude. And humanity never forgot a debt. So as the desert winds howled outside the tents, Carter whispered to himself, "You gave me a drink. I'll give you rivers." The promise echoed in his mind like thunder over dry plains. He didn't know how yet. But humans had a way of making the impossible happen. And Quorra, 9 was about to learn why no one underestimated them for long. The desert doesn't give second chances. On Quora 9, survival was measured in drops, not hours. For the Thalrians, water rationing had become instinct, a reflex deeper than hunger or fear. So when the strange humans started wasting water in strange contraptions, mutters of discontent spread like fire through brittle brush. Carter, however, ignored their muttering. He had always been stubborn. Back in the Earth Navy, instructors said it was both his greatest strength and his biggest liability. Carter doesn't let go of an idea, even when it's burning him alive. Out here, under the suns of a dying world, that stubbornness became fuel. Every morning, he scavenged. Bits of metal from ancient machines, cloth from abandoned camps, shards of glass half buried in dunes. He pieced them together with patience and bloody fingers. At first, his work seemed like the play of a mad hatchling, useless and wasteful. But then the water still he had built from junk produced not a mouthful, but a cup. The clan gasped. A cup of water was a miracle. By the third day, the still produced a jug. That night, Hesk approached him, eyes shining with cautious hope. "You say, this is only beginning?" Carter wiped sweat from his forehead. "Yeah. Distillation is the baby step. Back home, we desalinate oceans. Rivers of poisoned saltwater turned into fresh drinking water. The principle's the same. Oceans." Hesk's voice cracked on the word, like it was something obscene. "Whole worlds of water." Carter chuckled bitterly. "Yeah. Funny, right? My people drown in water while yours choke without it. If I can get word to them—" he trailed off. No, there was no if. His comm unit was fried in the crash. Until a rescue came, if it ever came, he was stranded. That meant the Thalrians were his crew, his mission, his responsibility. And humanity's responsibility never ended with itself. Not everyone shared Hesk's awe. "This is dangerous," Drask snarled during the next Firestone gathering. "The code says water must not be wasted. Yet the soft skin pours brine into flame, feeding it to the sky." "He feeds it back as water," Hesk countered sharply. Drask's claws tapped the stone floor in agitation. "A trick. A drain of fuel, of time, of hope. Better to leave him in the sands where he belonged." The words made Carter's jaw tighten, but he didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he leaned forward and said, "Where I come from, we've got a saying, don't bet against a human. You think I'm wasting time? Fine. But when your flask runs dry, you'll come knocking." Drask bared his teeth. "Or I will slit your throat in the night and spill no flask." The circle of Thalrians hissed at the threat. Yirik, the matriarch, raised her scarred hand for silence. "Enough. The code was honored when Hesk gave water. The human breathes under our roof. Until he fails, he stays." Carter inclined his head to her. "Then I'll make damn sure I don't fail." The next weeks tested that promise. Carter's stills multiplied. He taught Kiri how to assemble one, then another. She was quick with her hands, though skeptical with her words. By the time they had 3 functioning distillers, the clan's water stores had doubled. The Thalrians began to look at him differently. Not as prey, not as a drain, but as something else, a spark. Children whispered stories about the Softskin who pulled rivers from poison. Hunters returned from raids with strange metals for him, hopeful he could twist them into more miracles. Even Yirik watched him with a calculating gaze, as though she were measuring him for something larger than the clan itself. But with hope came danger. Other clans noticed. The first raid came at dawn, shadows sweeping across the dunes. The Yirik clan awoke to screeches, spears, and fire. Raiders stormed the camp, slashing waterskins, scattering stills, dragging away jars. Carter woke to chaos, choking smoke, and Kiri's claws dragging him from his tent. "They take the water," she screamed. "No." Carter's gut clenched. He sprinted toward his stills, only to find 2 smashed and the third overturned, water bleeding into sand. A raider, fanged and snarling, raised a spear. Training kicked in. Carter wasn't a soldier by accident. He ducked under the thrust, snatched up a shard of broken tubing, and jammed it into the raider's throat. The creature fell with a wet gurgle. Carter stood shaking, bloodied, but alive. The Thalrians fought with desperate fury. Drask split skulls like melons, roaring louder than the flames. Hesk, old but relentless, struck with precision. Kiri darted like a blade in the dark. But the raiders were many, and thirst made them savage. By dawn's full light, the Yirik camp was half ruin. 2 stills destroyed. 5 jars stolen. 3 Thaurians dead. Carter sat in the ashes, chest heaving, fury boiling inside him. He had seen war before. He had seen raids, pirates, scavengers. But something about watching people fight to the death for a jug of water, something as simple as water, burned in him worse than any battlefield. He turned to Yirik. This isn't working. You can't just fight over scraps forever. Her eyes, hard and scarred, narrowed. What else is there? Carter jabbed a finger at the ruined still. Scale up. Industrialize. On Earth, we didn't just survive deserts. We conquered them. Your rivals fight because they're thirsty. Make them less thirsty, and they stop being raiders. Or they join you. The clan stared as if he had suggested pulling the suns down from the sky. But Yirik's gaze didn't waver. Join us, or be drowned by us. Yes. Perhaps. Drask growled. Or perhaps the soft skin makes us a target. His tricks draw blood. Better to cut him loose. No, Yirik's voice was iron. The human stays. His rivers will flow, or his corpse will. Carter knew he needed to move faster. He studied the clan's ancient machines, most long since dead. Some were sky harvesters, massive towers once meant to pull moisture from the air. Their shells were cracked, their innards corroded, their circuits broken. But Carter saw more than junk. He saw potential. He begged tools, scavenged wire, hammered metal until his hands blistered. He cursed in 3 languages as he rewired old condensers, coaxed life into dead pumps, and tested salvaged filters. Kiri watched him work, skepticism softening into reluctant admiration. "You are like a hatchling," she said one night. "Always poking, breaking, tinkering. Yet somehow it breathes again." "Humans tinker," Carter said through gritted teeth. "That's what we do. We break stuff until it works better." By the end of the 2nd month, one of the sky harvesters hissed to life. The clan watched in awe as droplets formed along its cracked coils and trickled down into a trough. A single day produced more water than Carter's 3 stills had in a week. It wasn't a flood. It wasn't salvation. But it was hope, made metal. Hope, however, came at a cost. The raid had drawn attention. Scouts returned with grim news. 3 rival clans were on the move, drawn by rumors of flowing water. In the desert, rumors were as good as maps. Yirik called a war council. "They come for us," she said bluntly. "They smell rivers. They will not stop." Hesk looked weary. "We cannot fight them all." Drask slammed his claws on the table. "Then we drown them in blood." "No," Carter cut in. His voice was steady, commanding. The kind of voice that had once led men in zero-gravity combat drills. "Every alien I turn to him. You can't win by fighting thirst with blades. You'll just trade corpses for jars. You want to end this? Give them water." Silence. Then laughter. Bitter, incredulous. "Give water to enemies?" Drask spat. "Madness." "Not madness," Carter shot back. "Strategy. You want them to stop raiding? Make them depend on you instead. Share the harvesters. Teach them the stills. Bind them to you with rivers, not chains. On Earth, we learned the hard way. You don't survive deserts by fighting your neighbor. You survive by building together." Yirik's gaze lingered on him, weighing the words. For the first time, Carter thought she truly saw him, not just a fragile outsider, but something more dangerous, an idea. And ideas were harder to kill than armies. That night, Carter lay awake beneath the stretched hides of his tent, staring at the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth was spinning, full of oceans and storms and green forests. He thought of the rivers he had taken for granted, the rain on his face during cadet training, the endless hum of desalination plants back home. Now, on a world that had forgotten rain, he felt the weight of a promise pressing down like the sun's. "You gave me a drink. I'll give you rivers." The desert wasn't done testing him. Rival clans were coming. The harvesters were fragile. His body was stretched thin. But he had no intention of quitting. Humans didn't quit. And if Quora 9 thought it had seen desperation before, it hadn't met desperation wrapped in human stubbornness. The desert has no mercy. It buries bones without song, erases tribes without memory. When rival clans marched across the dunes toward Yurik's camp, they carried that mercilessness with them. Their banners, faded and tattered, whipped like flayed skin in the wind. Their bodies were gaunt, their eyes feral. They didn't come to bargain. They came to drink. Scouts returned breathless, their throats rasping from sprinting across the dunes. 3 clans, they croaked. Hundreds. Spears. Chariots. Fire oil. They will be here by dusk. Murmurs rippled through the Yurik clan. Some clutched their water flasks protectively, as if they could vanish into them. Others sharpened spears with grim determination. Drask paced like a caged beast, claws flexing. Carter stood in the center of the council tent, sweat dripping from his brow, a map of the desert scrawled in the dirt before him. He had spent the morning drawing diagrams, lines, arrows. Not battle plans, but something stranger. Something desperate. "They're not coming for blood," Carter said finally. "Not really. They're coming for water." "They will spill blood for it all the same," Drask snapped. "Yeah," Carter admitted, "but blood isn't the solution. If you fight them, you might hold them off once. Twice. But eventually, someone stronger will come, and they'll keep coming until you're dust. You can't fight thirst with swords." Yurik leaned forward, scarred hands folded. "Then what do you propose, Softskin?" "Invite them into our camp and let them drink us dry." Carter's lips curled into a grim smile. "No. Invite them into our future. Make them see that fighting us means nothing, but joining us means rivers." Drask growled low. "Madness. They will slit our throats while they drink." "Maybe," Carter said. "But if we play this right, they'll see what I've built. They'll see what's possible. And for the first time in their miserable, thirsty lives, they'll realize raiding is less profitable than cooperation." Hesk's old eyes glittered. "You would gamble the clan's life on hope?" Carter shook his head. "Not hope. Ingenuity. Trust me, humans are at our best with our backs against the wall." By dusk, the horizon seethed with movement. 3 clans, united by thirst but not by loyalty, descended like carrion birds. Dust cloaked the sky, blotting the twin suns. The air vibrated with the thrum of war drums and the clatter of bone spears. The Yurik clan formed a ragged line before their camp, shields raised, spears ready. Carter stood among them, heart hammering, the weight of improvised gear strapped across his shoulders. A coil of tubing, a pack of scavenged filters, and a satchel full of volatile mixtures he'd brewed in secret. They weren't weapons, not really. But Carter had learned long ago that anything could be a weapon if you were desperate enough. The raiders halted 100 paces away. Their chieftain strode forward, their scales painted with ash and blood. One stepped ahead, voice booming. "Clan Yurik, we smell your rivers. We see your towers. You will give us water, or we will take it with your lives." Yurik stepped forward, tall and scarred, unflinching. "This is our camp. Our work. Our harvest. Leave, or you will find only fire." The raiders roared with laughter, a sound dry as gravel. And then Carter stepped out from the line. His presence silenced them, if only for shock. Soft skin. Barely armored. Alien. "You want water?" Carter shouted, his voice carrying across the dunes. "Then look." He gestured behind him. The repaired sky harvester groaned and hissed, its coils dripping steadily into a trough. 3 more stills puffed steam, condensation dripping into jars. Even as the crowd watched, a jug filled, clear water sparkling in the dim light. The raiders stared, transfixed. Their mouths opened, tongues flicking. For them, water didn't just mean life. It meant victory. "You can fight us," Carter went on. "Kill us. Smash the machines. Then you'll get a few jugs, maybe a day's drink. And tomorrow, you'll be thirsty again." He let that sink in. "Or," he pointed at the machines again, "you can work with us. Build more. Share the knowledge. Stop fighting over scraps and start making your own rivers. The desert was silent, save for the hiss of the harvester. Finally, one of the raider chiefs spat. Tricks. Lies. You lure us in, then drown us in blood. Carter's jaw tightened. He reached into his satchel, pulled out a flask, and without hesitation dumped the water into the sand. Gasps rippled through both clans. See that? I don't care about a flask. I care about rivers. This isn't about tricking you. It's about survival. I'm human, and humans don't waste time fighting over scraps. We make more. That's how we turned deserts green back home. That's how we'll do it here. The raiders hesitated, their hunger battling their suspicion. But suspicion won. A war cry split the air. Spears flew. The raiders charged. The battlefield exploded into chaos. Carter dove behind a broken skimmer, tubing whistling over his head. Drask roared as he met the first wave, claws tearing through armor. Kiri darted and stabbed, fast as lightning. Yirik fought like a storm, her scars glowing in firelight. But there were too many. The Yirik line buckled, water jars shattered, machines toppled. The raiders surged toward the harvesters, eyes wild with thirst. Carter's mind raced. Fighting wasn't enough. He needed to shock them. Force them to see the futility of destruction. He ripped open his satchel, yanked out 2 makeshift canisters, and hurled them into the ground. They burst in a hiss of steam and smoke, choking the air with acrid vapor. The raiders staggered back, coughing, blinded. Carter leapt onto the harvester's frame, his voice ringing out. You break these machines, and you kill yourselves. You think this desert cares if you win a battle? It doesn't. You'll be thirsty tomorrow, and the day after, and forever, unless you change. Another wave of raiders pushed forward. Carter swung down, smashing one across the face with a length of tubing. Another lunged with a spear. Carter caught the shaft, twisted, and rammed it into the attacker's chest. Blood sprayed. Carter's lungs burned. His arms ached. But he kept shouting, kept fighting, kept forcing them to listen. This isn't about me. This isn't about Clan Yirik. This is about every damn one of you who's sick of licking dunettes and watching your hatchlings shrivel. You want rivers. You follow me. You want death. Then keep fighting. The battlefield hesitated. The words cracked through them harder than any blade. For the first time in generations, the desert offered them a choice. It was Yirik who tipped the scales. She bellowed across the sand, voice fierce as a war drum. Hear him. The human speaks true. Fight, and you will choke on dust. Work, and you will drink. Her warriors echoed her cry, voices rising with desperate conviction. Hesk raised a flask, pouring it into the sand beside Carter's earlier offering, a gesture unthinkable on Quora 9, now a symbol of defiance against scarcity. The raiders faltered. Spears wavered. Some snarled, unwilling to let go of old instincts. But others lowered their weapons, their gazes drawn to the dripping trough of the harvester. Water. Flowing. Real. One by one, they broke. Spears dropped. Voices stilled. Until only silence and the hiss of condensation remained. By dawn, the battlefield was not strewn with corpses, but with something stranger, cooperation. The raiders, gaunt and wary, approached the machines not as conquerors but as supplicants. Carter and the Thalrians showed them how the harvesters worked, how to feed the stills, how to patch the broken coils. The rival chieftains spat and snarled, but even they couldn't deny the sight of water pooling in jars. For the first time in centuries, the clans shared a drink without spilling blood first. Carter sat slumped against the harvester, exhausted, his hands blistered and bloody. Kiri crouched beside him, her crest twitching. You could have died, human. Many times. Yeah, Carter muttered with a tired grin. Wouldn't be the first time. You shouted at them like hatchlings, she said, almost in disbelief. And they listened. Carter's eyes closed. Humans are loud when we care about something. And I care about keeping my promise. Kiri tilted her head. Promise. He opened his cracked eyes, voice low. They gave me water. So I'll give them rivers. But the desert was not yet tamed. The clans might drink together today, but suspicion still lingered. Old grudges ran deep. And the machines were fragile, barely clinging to life. Cotter knew the hardest part was yet to come. The desert would not be conquered in a single night. But for the first time it could be fought, not with spears, but with ideas. And humanity had always been very, very good at fighting with ideas. The first dawn after the storm broke with light so sharp it seemed to cut through the wet air. Steam rose off the soaked plains, curling in tendrils that looked almost alive. The rivers ran fuller than they had in generations, and the drought that had once defined Corval's existence now felt like the memory of a nightmare you weren't sure had been real. But for the humans, dawn meant something else. It meant assessment, repair, and a stubborn refusal to be satisfied until the work was done. When Rin woke, she found Captain Mason already knee-deep in mud, sleeves rolled to the elbows, inspecting the newly carved canals they had helped forge during the chaos. His voice carried across the valley, barking orders and encouragement alike, his tone less commander and more farmer. Somehow, this human had become a leader not only of his crew but of her people too. "Morning, Rin," Mason called, giving her a wide grin even though his face was caked in dirt. "Congratulations, you're officially part of the Water Corps." She laughed, shaking her head. "And here I thought my diplomatic role was prestigious." "Diplomacy's great. But ditches save lives," he said, clapping his hands, and for a moment she thought maybe he was right. Even after the storm delivered its torrents, problems remained. Floodwaters could destroy as much as they nourished. With the rivers swollen, entire villages risked being swept away. The humans didn't celebrate too early. Instead, they treated this as stage 2 of the mission. That's what stunned Rin most. Humans never stopped at survival. They looked beyond the moment, into what came next. By midday, the Corrali watched in awe as humans strung together machines, scavenged pumps, and even reprogrammed irrigation drones that had long been dormant. They turned the chaos into a system. Their madness, as some elders called it, was in fact a discipline born of never accepting that limits were final. At first, her people resisted. "This is our land," one of the Elder Council said. "We have tilled it for generations. We need no off-worlders to tell us how to shape it." Mason didn't argue. He simply handed the elder a shovel. "Then lead the way. Show us how you'd save it." The silence that followed said everything. 4 years, they had been paralyzed by the drought. Their traditions gave no guidance for rain so heavy it could drown a harvest. So the elder dug, pride slipping into humility as others joined. Humans and Corrali worked side by side until the sun dipped low again. And Rin realized that the drought had been more than just lack of water. It had been a drought of will, of imagination. Humanity had broken both. When night came, fires burned along the riverside. The rains had finally eased, the clouds pulling back to reveal stars so sharp they seemed etched in ice. Rin sat with Mason, watching the embers glow. "You've given us more than water," she admitted, her voice quiet. "You've given us possibility." Mason shook his head, poking at the fire with a stick. "Nah, you had that all along. We just reminded you it was still there." She studied him, baffled. "Do you always deflect credit so easily?" He chuckled. "Deflect? Maybe. Or maybe we know something you don't." He glanced up at the stars, eyes reflecting their cold light. "The universe doesn't hand anyone guarantees. Not humans, not Corrali, not the mightiest empire. You fight for every drop, every inch, every breath. When you stop fighting, that's when you lose." Rin let his words settle over her. They sounded harsh, almost cruel. Yet here she was, sitting beside the man who had made rivers flow again. The following days blurred into a rhythm of rebuilding. Humans taught Corrali to capture storm runoff in reservoirs. Together they built levees reinforced with both alien alloys and humble stone. Children who once trudged miles for a sip of brackish water now splashed through puddles, shrieking with laughter that echoed across the valley. The change was undeniable. But then came the delegation from the capital. Stern-faced officials, cloaked in ceremonial silks that stayed spotless no matter how muddy the path. They arrived demanding explanations. "You have disrupted centuries of tradition," one announced, glaring at Mason as though he were a criminal. "You've altered the flow of sacred rivers. You've meddled in things beyond your right. Mason didn't flinch. You're welcome. The chamber filled with gasps. Rin stepped forward, heart pounding. They are not our enemies. They are our saviors. Without them, the rains would have killed as surely as the drought. They have shown us what we forgot, that survival is not dishonor. The officials looked unconvinced. But outside, the laughter of children carried through the windows. The evidence was undeniable. For the first time in living memory, water wasn't a weapon of fate, it was abundance. The true climax came not with words but with proof. Weeks later, the first harvest grew. Green fields stretched where once there had been dust. The Karali bent low, touching the stalks of grain in disbelief. Many wept openly. Rin herself could hardly breathe as she stood among the shimmering fields, the air alive with the hum of insects and the perfume of blossoms long dormant. She turned to Mason. This will never be forgotten. You gave us our world back. Mason shrugged, though his eyes softened. You gave me water when I was dying. This is just fair trade. The simplicity of it nearly broke her. A people had been transformed, their entire history redirected, because they had offered a single human a sip of water in the desert. And so the legend spread. Not as propaganda, nor as decree, but as story. From village to capital, the tale was told. A Karali found a human dying of thirst and gave him water. The human repaid them not with thanks, but with rivers. Soon, neighboring worlds heard. At first they scoffed. Humans, those fragile creatures, what could they possibly offer? But then trade ships arrived carrying irrigation systems designed by human engineers, adaptable to any terrain. Starving colonies began to bloom. And everywhere the story was told, it carried the same refrain. They gave water to a stranded human, and humanity ended their drought forever. Years later, Rin stood on a balcony overlooking fields so lush it hurt to remember the dust that once choked them. Mason was older now, hair streaked with gray, but still barking orders in that maddening mix of humor and ferocity. He had long since refused titles or honors, calling himself just a guy with muddy boots. But to her people, he was more. "Do you think you'll ever return to Earth?" she asked him once, as twilight painted the sky. He tilted his head. "Maybe. But Earth doesn't need me. Here, I matter." Rin smiled, feeling the truth of it. Humanity had not just quenched her people's thirst for water, they had reignited their thirst for life. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that was what made humans different. Not their machines, not their strange stubbornness, but their refusal to accept despair as destiny. When the final rains of the season fell, Mason stood in the fields, letting the drops soak him through. Children splashed at his boots, and farmers sang songs old and new. Rin stood beside him, whispering so only he could hear, "Your people are insane." Mason laughed. "We prefer unstoppable." And with the rivers flowing, the fields green, and the stars glittering above, she couldn't disagree.